All right, so like I said, today's part 2 of our 3-part series of apologetics. This next question today we're going to be answering is why is Jesus the only way to heaven, and why did he have to die? Okay. Again, me and Heather, like I was saying last week, we're having these discussions about we want you guys to be prepared to be able to answer and to be able to tell people, or at least know for yourself, why you believe the things that you believe. It's not just something that is there and you don't know, you don't have a reason for it. So that being said, before we get into anything, I just want to say, normally I know that we have kind of like this open dialogue between us. I've got a lot to go through today, so if we could just hold the questions that you might have to the end, I would greatly appreciate it. I don't want to hold this out here for 45 minutes, so let's. Like I said, if you could hold the questions to the end, we'll get through this really quick. Before we get into the scripture, if you guys want to, while I'm talking, get into John chapter 14. Who here thinks that Jesus is a liar? No hands? Good. How about, do you think that Jesus was crazy? If you think he's crazy, raise your hand. No hands. Okay, that's good. How about this? Do you think that Jesus was more or less a good guy? If you think he was a pretty good person, raise your hand. Yeah. Okay. Lots of hands. All right. That's good. So I just want you guys to understand that as being kind of like our basis. Some assumptions that we're just going to make right there. He's not a liar. He's not crazy. And he is a good guy. He wants good things for people. So we're going to go to John chapter 14. We're starting at verse 1. I'm just going to read out of the New Living Translation. If you guys have the electronic Bibles, that you're going to follow me along there. And it says, "Don't let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God and trust also in me. There is more than enough room in my Father's home. If this were not so, would I have told you that I am going to prepare a place for you? When everything is ready, I will come and get you so that you will always be with me where I am. And you know the way to where I'm going." "No, we don't, Lord," Thomas said. "We have no idea where you're going. So how can we know the way?" Jesus told him, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one can come to the Father except through me. If you had really known me, you would know who my Father is. From now on, you do know him, and you have seen him." Philip said, "Lord, show us the Father, and we will be satisfied." Jesus replied, "I have been with you all this time, Philip, and yet you still do not know who I am? Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. So why are you asking me to show him to you? Don't you believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? The words I speak are not my own, but my Father who lives in me does his work through me. Just believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me, or at least believe because of the work you have seen me do. I tell you the truth, anyone who believes in me will do the same works I have done, and even greater works, because I am going to be with the Father. You can ask for anything in my name, and I will do it, so that the Son can bring glory to the Father. Yes, ask me anything in my name, and I will do it." Jesus is not crazy. He's not a liar. And he's a good dude. He wants good things for your life. These are 3 assumptions we can just go off of. And those are things that you're going to hear, if you ask basically anyone, whether they believe that Jesus is God or not, or whether they're a Christian or not, or whatever, or how deep their faith in God goes, you can basically get people to agree with those, at least those 3 statements. They're not going to tell you that Jesus is a liar. They don't think he's crazy. And he was a good guy. At the very least, you'll hear historians say he was a good moral leader. Okay, he was a good person. So, because we know those things about him, we can assume that anything that he says, anything that he does, is true, and we can rely on it. But let's say you don't believe that. Let's say some people say, okay, well, I have problems trusting certain things that he says, because sometimes he says things that are really kind of extreme. I am in the Father, and the Father is in me. If you have seen the Father, or if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. No one can get to the Father except through me. Some people would take great exception to a lot of the things that he's saying right here. And it sounds strange. But we know that Jesus isn't a liar, so when he says something, we know it's true. But for those people who maybe don't have that trust in Jesus and the things that he says, let's just back up for a minute. Let's go through the 4 Gospels, the book of Acts, and book of Revelations. Every time you see something in red, Jesus said it, right? Okay? Let's take all those things in red, and let's just pick out what we know and understand and what we agree with. Okay? If there's things that maybe Jesus says that you don't understand, which everyone can raise their hand and say there is part of that because we will never fully understand him and everything that he says. But if there's things that he says that we don't understand, let's just set it to the side. Maybe even if there's things that he says that you don't agree with, we can even go that far and say that there's things that he said, I'm not really sure about that. I can't really go with that. Let's set even those aside for a second and just take the parts that Jesus, what he says that we understand and what we agree with. And if you lay that out, and you can see that every time he says or does something, he's doing something to positively benefit somebody's life. He's healing them. He's bringing them away from something dangerous. He's giving them good instructions for their life. So you take that, and then not only that, but for you guys, I want you guys to also ask yourself, what has God done for me in my life personally? There's situations that in you, specifically to you, to your life, you can say, yes, God did this for me. Or God was here in this situation. Or there was this person in my life that they were kind of disruptive and they were hurting things in my faith or some aspect of my life. And at some point, God took them out. Or even better one is when God sends somebody into your life that has a positive impact on your life and probably even pulls you closer to him. So you have, and I'm not going to list here all the situations that can be named about what God has done in your life, but you know them. So if you lay out the things that are in the Bible that Jesus says that you know and understand, and include the things that you've experienced personally with Jesus in your life, you see that Jesus has set this track record of being reliable, trustworthy. He loves you. He's never going to leave you. He's always got good intentions for you. And you see someone who, if you see anybody, whether it's a physical person like me in front of you, or if you're talking about someone like God, it doesn't matter who they are, but if you have somebody who's consistently setting a good track record, being a positive influence in your life, you can naturally say, yes, I trust this person. And you can even go as far to say that, when they say some other things that maybe you don't understand, or even things that you don't agree with, when you look at this person's history and how they've interacted with you, you can say, you know what, as a package, as a whole deal, I can trust Jesus. Because if anybody's going to sit here and say that, well, I agree that everything he's done in my life is good, and I agree that all the things that I understand in the Word and things that I agree with are good for me, but these other few things, this 5%, where I'm not sure what he's saying, or I don't agree with it even, because of that, I'm not going to follow Jesus at all. How many people can say that's kind of ridiculous? If you know anybody and you say, if Ralphie here, Raphael, Ninja Turtle, if I'm friends with you, and you, for all the time that I've known you, you've been a good, consistent friend, and you make one statement that I'm like, huh? And if over that one statement I said, I'm not going to be your friend anymore, I'd be kind of ridiculous, wouldn't I? Redonkulous. Okay? Because over the entire time I've known him, he set this track record for being a good person and a reliable friend. So I can probably trust that even though he said something I don't understand, there's probably something more to it. Maybe something I don't understand yet. Maybe somewhere where I need to improve. So we can trust that Jesus and what he's saying and what he believes and what he does for us is good. And so when he says things like, when you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And the only way to the Father is through me. Even if it sounds harsh, even if it sounds strange, even if it sounds narrow-minded, it's true. And that's the first thing you'll hear people when you say, like, well, do you believe that Jesus is the only way to God, the only way to heaven? Yes. Well, why are you being so narrow-minded? That's the first thing you hear. Why are you being so narrow-minded? And guys, let me explain this to you. It's not narrow-minded. If I tell you that I want to get to the moon, if you want to get to the moon, you have to take a rocket ship or a spaceship to get there. Am I right? You can't take a plane. You can't take a boat. You can't take a bicycle to the moon. Well, why? Why do you only have to take a rocket ship? That's so narrow-minded. No, dummy, that's just how you get there. Okay? You can't take a bike to the moon. It won't work. All right? It's not narrow-minded. It's just a fact. All right? Same person walk up to you, and I tell you, you need water to live. Well, why are you being so narrow-minded? I feel like I can live off of burgers and salads all of my life.
Cool.
Okay. Hush. Hush. I don't eat salad, so I'm not talking about myself.
Hey Jim, why are you so narrow-minded?
I'm not narrow-minded. So you want to live off of burgers and salads. Okay, let's wait 3 days. And when you come back to me crawling, going, water, okay, then we'll talk again about how much you need water. Okay? So you need water to survive. You need a rocket ship or a spaceship to get to the moon. You need Jesus to get to heaven. It's not narrow-minded. It's just how it works. It's an essential piece of our walk with God. You need Jesus to get to heaven. Okay, so let's say now, okay, all right, so you've convinced me, maybe I agree now, okay, yeah, Jesus is the only way to heaven. I understand where you're coming from now. But why did he have to die? I don't get that. Why did Jesus have to die? So let's take this. So I'm walking down the road. No, I'm not walking down the road. I'm on the sidewalk because walking down the road is dangerous. You shouldn't do that. You should be on the sidewalk. Right. You don't want to get run over. That's how you meet Jesus too soon. And you don't want that. So you're walking down the sidewalk and some guy passes you and all of a sudden you just see him drop dead next to you. And you're like, what the heck? And then some dude runs up and goes, dude, did you see that? He just died for you. And you're like, huh? What are you talking about? How did that? He just died. No, what you don't understand is that someone was across the street and they had a gun and they shot at you. And he jumped in front of that bullet and took it for you. That way you didn't have to die.
He might have used a grenade.
And so I was like, oh, okay, now I get it. Okay, so this guy jumped in front of this bullet and he took it for me and he died instead of me. Okay, now I understand. I can appreciate what he did. So when I tell you guys that Jesus took a bullet for us, understand that this is true. Why did he take a bullet? Well, to understand this, we got to go back to the beginning. So watch me whip all the way back to Genesis 1:1. Okay? When God created everything. I can whip. Okay? So we go back to Genesis 1:1. When God created everything, he created it good. Okay? He created it perfect, including us. But he gave us the ability to choose between right and wrong. We went over that last week. Okay? He gave us the ability to choose. We chose sin. And as soon as we did that, sin entered our body. It corrupted our spirit and our bodies. Okay? Which is why in any time now when two people come together to have a child, that sin gets passed on through. And so every new person that is created is born with that stain of sin on them. Okay? So in order to take care of this, God had told his people, so you've sinned, you've made this mess out of things, but I still want a relationship with you. I want to do something to try and make this connection. So he gave them a way to kind of cover up their sin. And through the Jewish law, you find out that when you do something wrong, I believe it's in the book of Leviticus, there's like all sorts of different laws and then penalties for when you break these laws. Okay? And you find out that if you have this, one of the law's requirements were you to take this lamb, this innocent animal who did nothing wrong, and it had to be a perfect one. It couldn't be a lamb with a bum leg or some patches in its coat or was sick or anything. It had to be a fully healthy, fully perfect lamb. And what would happen, and I know this is going to get a little gruesome for you guys, but I need you to understand what happened. The priest would take that lamb, they would tie it to the altar, and then they would slit its throat, drain the blood from this animal, this innocent animal. The priest would then take some of that blood and mark it on himself, sprinkle it around the altar, and then dump it over the rest of the altar. And guys, the altar looked like a murder scene. It looked gruesome. There's blood everywhere. There's this innocent animal dead.
Why did you
because of your sin. because of my sin. Okay? This animal did nothing. But God said, I can't overlook sin. I can't do it. I'm a judge. I have to judge what's wrong. And so he has us take this innocent animal, and the blood from this innocent animal covers our sin. It doesn't erase it. It covers it until the next time we sin. And then we have to do it again and again and again. And it's the same story every year for thousands of years. Innocent animals being slaughtered in this gruesome, horrific way that's only fit for really horror movies. And God finally stops and he goes, this is enough. This has got to stop. You can't keep doing this. You're missing the picture. This is, I told you, this is the punishment. This is what you have to do to kind of reconcile yourself with me, because sin is so disgusting to me. I won't have it. I won't participate in it. I won't put up with it. And that's why I designed this to be the way it is, so you can understand how horrible this is. Anyone who tells you that your sin is okay is lying to you. They're lying. It's not okay. God doesn't excuse sin. He's not all right with it. He hates it. But the blood of this innocent animal will cover it. Not erase it, cover it. Until you do it again, and then you have to make another sacrifice. Finally, God gets tired of this, and he says, you know what? There needs to be another step. Something more drastic, more extreme needs to happen. So he sends his son. Jesus always existed, but now he's existing in a human form. And the Holy Spirit conceives him inside of a virgin woman. So we're bypassing the whole sin being passed down through men, through the male gene, okay? Because it's not two people coming together to make a child. It's God creating someone in a virgin. Jesus, born free of sin, lives this perfect life. Free, he doesn't do anything wrong. In fact, it's not that he just didn't do anything wrong. He did everything he could to make a connection with us. He's healing people. He's raising people from the dead. He's taking people out of their bad situations and changing their life for the positive. He's allowing people to follow him. And through that, he's blessing them through just an innumerable amount of things. Read the Gospels and you'll find out all the things that Jesus did.
It also challenges the spiritual leadership of that day too.
Yep. And then comes the hard part. God takes his son, and Jesus, of his own free will, takes the punishment that God requires for sin. God's not okay with sin. He'll never be all right with it, ever. Jesus received the beating of all eternity. They punched him, they kicked him, they spit on him. They tied him up to this post and they whipped him with a cat of nine tails. If you don't know what that is, it's a whip. And at the end of each one of these strands, you have pieces of glass and metal and other sharp things tied into it. And they would whip him on his back. And again, this gets gruesome, but when you get done getting whipped by a cat of nine tails, like the way Jesus did, you don't see a man's, back. You see bone, you see muscle tissue, blood, and parts of flesh hanging off of his back. That's how disgusting sin is to God. And he wanted us to understand what he thinks about it. But he knows that an animal is not going to be able to be enough to cover sin. He had to send the perfect sacrifice, the Lamb of God, his son. Jesus willingly crawls up on the cross. They nail him to the cross, and he dies, just like that lamb did. Jesus had to die so that we can put our faith in him, because that's all he said. He said, you don't have to do any of the work. You don't have to do anything. All you have to do is believe that I am the Son of God, that I am God himself in the flesh. And I'm going to pay your penalty for you. And all you have to do is put your faith in me. And I will continuously and constantly cleanse you of your sin. And you can live without the guilt of knowing that every time you sin, you have to go make another sacrifice, because I already made the biggest sacrifice that can be made. There's nothing that can top it. All he asks is that we follow him, is that we accept God's Son, God's perfect sacrifice for our life, and live for him, and do what he needs us to do so that he can continue to benefit other people.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
What you guys have to understand too is it wasn't just about the physicality of what Christ endured. It was the first time in his existence as a human being, complete and total separation from God. Complete and total separation. He hung on that cross. You know, he said, God, God, why have you forsaken me? Because the first time he's ever felt that separation from the Lord. And he did it. He did it so that he could bridge that gap to understand where we were coming from. Because he was God. He had always been God. He came down. He lived this life. He endured the things that we do daily. So he understood. He grasped that. Then he got to a point where he's like, you know what? This is the first time I've been separated from God. This is what it feels like when I don't know him. You know, when your friends walk up to you and they're like, who's this God? Like, why does God exist? God doesn't exist. You know, it's that kind of separation. It was almost like that kind of separation for him. And he endured it so that we could have a relationship with Christ, free of sacrifice, free of that physical slaughter, lamb sacrifice. And he took them all. And you guys have to understand, too, every single person, past, present, future, that lives and dies on this earth, he took on every single one of those sins.
That's right.
Every single one of those sins. Can you think of how many times you've sinned against God? Just yourself. And then multiply that by
Billions.
billions. And you know, an infinite amount of people with the same amount, more or less, of sin in their lives. He took that all on. He took that all on the cross. And only he could do that. Only he could do that.
Exactly. Exactly. He made it about as easy as it can be for us, guys. He created us perfect. We walked away. He gave us a way to continue to have a relationship with him and make a sacrifice to try and continue to follow him. Finally, he sends his son, the biggest and most perfect sacrifice that you could possibly have, just for you. Just for you. Just for the chance that you would choose to follow him. Not the guarantee, because there's a reason why there is heaven and why there is hell. It's because there's going to be people that choose not to follow him, and he still died for them, just so they'd have the opportunity, not the guarantee to go to heaven. Jesus is God. He is the only way. He's proven that because he's trustworthy, and we can see what he's done in our life and what's written in Scripture as reliable and good for our lives. And finally, there was a mistake that was made on us, and God continued to reach out and provide the ultimate sacrifice so that we can live free in his sacrifice as long as we dedicate our lives to following him. If you could bow our heads.